You know, lately it seems like a lot of people have woken up to the idea that the Beretta 92 and 96 series guns are great self-defense guns and great carry guns. And because of that, a lot more people are buying them for self-defense, for carry. I think a lot of that has to do with some really nice custom Berettas coming out of places like Wilson Combat and especially Langdon Tactical recently, their LTT. Those guns have made people think, wow, I would really like to have one of those. But there are some people that can't afford one of those, so they buy a regular Beretta, and then they want to kind of update it to make it more like the custom guns. Well, a lot of people know that I've always loved Berettas. They're my favorite gun, and they know I carry one quite often. And they also know I'm someone who likes to modify my guns to make them the best they can be for me. So they ask me, what are the changes that I must do to a Beretta 92 or a 96 to make it a good carry gun? What things just definitely need to be changed? Well, I'm going to say I don't think there's anything that definitely needs to be changed, but there are some things that I would suggest you change. And I think the best way to illustrate the things that I would change is to go through a list of everything that I have modified on my own Beretta 96 that I carry quite often. I'll show you everything I've done to this one, and I'll let you decide which ones of those changes would be good for you. Now, the first thing we're going to look at that I changed is purely a cosmetic change. I changed the grips. I put on some samurai edge grips because I wanted to go with a theme for this gun. You can change grips out to get grips that are tackier or less tacky or whatever you like, but grips is something you should usually change on a gun because seldom do the stock grips fit everyone. So get a grip you like, put it on the gun, it'll make it a better carry gun. Now, the next change I have made to this gun here is one that I recommend to everyone. This is one of the rare ones I will say you probably should do if you want to carry it, unless you really like a manual safety, and that is the G conversion. I have converted this one to where it's a decocker only. It no longer has a safety. I think that's one of the main things you should do to a Beretta if you purchase one that isn't already a G type. Another modification I made to this gun is I changed out the sights. I wanted night sights on it with the white rings. The stock sights are okay, but they're not great. So I changed out the sights to night sights. That's something I would suggest to everyone also if you're not really crazy about the stock sights. Now, another modification I made that I'm not going to say everyone needs to make, this is just for people who don't like 40 as much as they like 357 SIG, like myself. I changed out to a conversion 357 SIG barrel in stainless here to go with that samurai edge look that I wanted for my gun. So that's one modification I've made. It's not something I would say you have to do, and it's definitely not necessary to make it a good carry gun. It's just something I like. Another little cosmetic change I made is I bead blasted my metal trigger down to a stainless look, even though it's not stainless steel, just so it would match the barrel and give it a little bit of a nice look. I actually did that because of the Langdon Tacticals having the silver triggers. So that's one change I made cosmetic. You don't got to do that at all. Now, another change I made is the hammer. I took out the stock hammer and I put in a skeletonized combat hammer. I just think these are a lot better. I think they look better. They take a little weight away, not much, not enough to notice, but I just think they're an overall improvement to the gun. Now, another modification that I did here is I took out the stock plastic guide rod and I replaced it with a captured steel guide rod. This is something, once again, I'm going to say you don't have to do, but I do think in this gun, since it's not a tilting barrel, that switching to a steel guide rod is actually a good idea. I actually like them better. I think that they're more sturdy. So if you want one of those, and I think they add a little bit of extra weight to the front, not much, but a little, and every little bit matters. So I do recommend the all steel guide rods. Another modification I made that is sort of cosmetic and sort of functional is I switched out the lanyard loop, the mainspring cap here that had the lanyard loop on it. I switched it out with a Wilson Combat mag guide. This does look better, I think. It makes the magazine look more flush, and it also helps in reloading. So if you ever want to reload quickly, that might be an aid to you there, and also it looks better. So that's one thing I say you can do if you want to. Absolutely not necessary. If you'd rather have the lanyard loop, then leave the lanyard loop. I would suggest you change the stock plastic ones out with metal ones if you want the lanyard loop, but other than that, this is up to you. Now, one change I made here that I do suggest people do if you feel comfortable doing it is to change out the mag release. The stock ones are a little harder to activate and they're a little slick. The ones from Wilson Combat here have a textured surface and they're a little larger. They're just better overall. So that's one change. I do recommend changing the mag release. Now, to show you any more here, I'm going to have to take the slide off and show you some changes I did internally that actually affect the function of the gun a little more. All right, now this modification is one I do recommend to everyone. I highly recommend this one. I changed out the trigger spring that comes stock on the gun, that little spiraled piece of metal spring that, is hard to put back in and easy to lose. I changed it out to a Wilson Combat reduced power trigger spring here. You can see it's got a little rod right there with a spring on it, a little loop back here that hooks between the prongs of the trigger here. This really changes the trigger pull. It makes it a lot smoother, a lot cleaner. It does reset a little slower because it's a reduced power, but it'll still reset faster than you need it to. So I do recommend changing out that trigger spring right there. Now, speaking of springs, another change that I will recommend to people here is I changed the hammer spring. The hammer springs on these guns usually come in about 20 pounds stock. That's what they use in the stock guns. And that's a little heavy. It gives you a heavy trigger pull. It's great for a combat gun, I guess, but it's not really good for self-defense in my opinion. Now, a lot of people will go to the D hammer spring, which is a 16-pound spring. And it does make a big improvement, but I actually took it quite a bit further and I put one of the Langdon Tactical 12-pound springs in here, and it makes the trigger so much better, so much lighter. Now, a lot of people worry about light primer strikes with the 12-pound hammer spring. I have not experienced a single light primer strike. I have put every 357 mag ammo I can purchase locally through this gun, and it works just fine with the 12-pound spring. Now, if you're shooting like import NATO ammo with really hard primers, you might run into a light primer strike or two. But if you're shooting any domestic ammunition or ammunition you buy right off the shelf at any of your sporting goods stores, I don't think you'll have a problem with the 12-pound hammer spring, and it makes the trigger so much better. I'm talking about a trigger pull that is now at well under 5.5 pounds. That's a pretty good double action trigger pull for any carry gun, much less a Beretta. And the single action trigger pull is averaging just under 3.5 pounds. That's 1911 territory. That is an excellent self-defense single action trigger. And finally, the last modification, I saved kind of the best for last here. To go along with that much lighter trigger, I put in a Langdon Tactical trigger bar. This trigger bar really reduces the over travel on your trigger, and it reduces the reset, makes this trigger awesome. And combined with that lighter spring, it just makes this gun a pleasure to shoot. If you watch here as I push the trigger rearward to where it gets ready to break, then it breaks. There's no extra travel. That's pretty freaking awesome. Now, if we carefully watch the reset here, there, it's reset. Barely moved, and it's reset. So as you can see, all those mods together not only make the gun look better in my opinion, because a lot of them are cosmetic, but they also function better. It's got better sights, it's got a decocker instead of a safety for carry, which I think is much better, and the combination of that trigger spring, that hammer spring, and that new Langdon Tactical trigger bar makes the gun shoot like a dream. It makes this, in my opinion, a perfect carry gun. So there you have it. There's all the modifications I've made to my Beretta 96 to make it what I consider to be the best possible carry gun it can be. I've made changes both cosmetically and performance-wise. So now you can look at all those changes and decide which ones would work for you.